So you're an old pro. Okay. Good to see you. How are you? Thank you. We're thrilled to be here. How are you? Good to see you, Robert. Thank you so much. Well, everybody, it's great to see you. First of all, I just want to thank Andy and Ed for hosting us here today. Can everybody hear me? There we go. I want to thank Andy and Etta for hosting us today because not only did they open up their home to all these Secret Service people and all these press and the whole bit, but they also arranged for perfect weather. I know Bill Richardson tried to take credit for it, but it's actually Andy and Etta that did it, and so we are very grateful to them for their hospitality here today. And obviously, we're extraordinarily grateful to Andy for his service in the Marine Corps, and for Etta doing what she's doing in our school system. And so, thank you very much. Everybody knows your governor, Bill Richardson, and we are grateful to him. Your lieutenant governor, Diane Denise, who is, I believe, going to be also the next governor of the great state of New Mexico. We've got Congressman Martin Heinrich, and I will say that Martin told me that if I was going to come to Albuquerque, that I better visit the South Valley the next time I come. So he gets some credit for bringing me here today. And to all of you, thank you so much for being here. We've been trying to do more of these, just to get me out of the house. It's a very nice house that they provide for me in Washington, but at times you do feel like you're in the bubble. And so every once in a while I need to just get out of there and have a chance to talk to folks and listen to them and answer questions, but also get suggestions and advice about what's happening in the country. And so instead of doing all the talking, what I want to do is maybe just provide a few opening remarks and then basically have a conversation with you about things that are important to you and important to this community, important to this state. There is one thing I want to focus on, though, if you don't mind, in my opening remarks, and that's the issue of education. We have gone through, obviously, the toughest economic situation since the Great Depression. And no state has been untouched. No group of people has been untouched by the devastation. We lost 8 million jobs. The financial sector almost completely melted down. We almost slipped into a Great Depression, and so we acted very quickly to try to stop the bleeding. And we've had some success. An economy that was shrinking, was contracting by 6% when I was sworn in. It's now growing again. We were losing 750,000 jobs a month when I was sworn in. We've had 8 consecutive months of private sector job growth. So we're making progress and we're moving in the right direction. But in addition to the immediate crisis that we were dealing with, one of the challenges that I think everybody around the country, when I talk to them, recognizes is we've got to have a long-term plan for how we make sure America remains the #1 economy in the world, and how we make sure that we still have opportunities for middle-class Americans to prosper and to expand, to be able to support their families and send their kids to college and retire with dignity and respect. And how do we provide ladders for people who aren't yet in the middle class to be able to get into the middle class? How do we help small businesses grow? How do we help make sure that our large businesses are the innovators that are designing the new products that we're able to sell overseas? You know, the issue of how we stay competitive and are able to succeed in the next generation the same way that previous generations have succeeded, that's a question that I think a lot of people have been asking themselves for a long time. Because keep in mind, even before this financial crisis, we were slipping in a lot of ways. From 2001 to 2009, during that 8-year period, wages, average wages for middle-class families actually fell by 5%. Think about that. People's real incomes were actually falling, and this was at a time before the crisis. So supposedly the economy was growing and things were going pretty well. In fact, people's incomes were falling. During that same period of time, job growth was the most sluggish that it's been since World War II. So part of the reason I decided to run for president was because we had all these problems that we hadn't been dealing with for a long time, even before the crisis hit, that we had to deal with if we want to stay competitive for the 21st century. And the number one issue in terms of us succeeding as an economy is going to be how well we educate and how well we train our kids. Nothing else comes close. Now, the truth of the matter is we used to have, by far, the best education system in the world. We were the first nation in the world to have compulsory public education. And so as people were moving off the farms, moving into the cities, moving into industry, suddenly they were able to get the training and the skills they needed for an advanced industrial economy. And we had the best universities in the world and the best colleges in the world, and we had the we ranked number one in the proportion of college graduates in the world. We now rank 12th, and that's just happened in a generation. We went from number 1 to number 12 in the number of college graduates we have. Even folks who didn't go to college still got a good education. My grandmother, she was an amazing woman. She passed away a couple of years ago, but she never went to college. She worked when my grandfather went off to World War II. She worked on an assembly line, making bombers. She was like Rosie the Riveter. And then when my grandfather came back, he got the GI Bill to go to college, but she didn't get the GI Bill, so she went to work. She started off as a secretary. She ended up as a vice president at a bank in Hawaii. And despite the fact that she hadn't gone to college, she was so well prepared in terms of math and reading and skills that she could end up getting an executive position, working her way up from being a secretary. Well, now we rank 21st in science education in the world, and we rank 25th in math education in the world. So the trend line is that we're not at the top in terms of college graduates. We're not at the top at science. We're not at the top at math. We've got a third of our students who enroll who never graduate from high school. And all this means that not only is it bad for the young people who aren't getting this education, typically a high school grad gets paid about $10,000 less than a college grad. And over the course of a lifetime, it means hundreds of thousands of dollars in lost income. But it's also bad for the country as a whole because we don't have as many engineers and we don't have as many scientists. We're not inventing the new products that are going to make all the difference in terms of how well we succeed. So the reason I wanted to raise this is because there are a lot of issues we've been working on in Washington. A lot of them get a lot of attention. But something that hasn't gotten as much attention is what we've been trying to do, working with states and local school districts over the last 2 years to make sure that we're moving in a new direction in improving our education system. And let me just tell you a couple of things that we've done. First of all, we set up something called Race to the Top. And what we said was that if states wanted to get some additional money, some extra money to help their schools, they would have to compete for that money by showing us what it is that you're doing to reform the school system so that you get excellent teachers, you have high standards, the schools are accountable, that you're going after the lowest performing schools and not just sort of skimming off the top. And as a consequence of this competition called Race to the Top, we had about $4 billion. We've ended up seeing 32 states change their laws to reform the system so that the whole education structure works better for our kids and makes it more accountable, and we start providing better training and better recruitment for our teachers and more professional development and additional resources. So it's been a big boost for education all across the country, moving forward on a reform agenda that doesn't just dictate to states, here's how you have to do everything, but it says, here's some criteria for success. If you have a plan to match that, then we're going to help you. So that's number one. Number two, we've been helping to make sure that more young people get early childhood education, because the studies show that if kids are well prepared when they get to school, then they are much likely to do better. If they know their colors and their numbers and their letters and they know how to sit still. I remember when Malia and Sasha were young, that was a key training point. And so early childhood education is, when it's well designed, makes a big difference, and we've been doing that. Third thing we've been doing is focusing on higher education. Now, it turns out that we've got the lottery scholarship program here in New Mexico is terrific. But we've got a whole lot of states all across the country and a lot of young people who still rely on Pell Grants and student loan programs in order to finance their overall education. And what we've been able to do is, when we came into office, about tens of billions of dollars were going to banks and financial intermediaries who were essentially acting as middlemen for the student loan program, even though it was federally guaranteed, right? So they weren't taking any risks, but it was passing through them, and they would skim off tens of billions of dollars of profits. So we said, well, that doesn't make any sense. Why don't we just have the money go directly from the government to the student, and we'll save all that money? And now what we've been able to save $60 billion that we're putting in now to make sure that millions more young people across the country are able to get the student loans and the Pell Grants that they need. And starting in 2014, we're actually going to be able to say to young people that you will never have to pay more than 10% of your income in repaying your student loans. And if you go into public service, if you're like Etta and you go into teaching, for example, after 10 years, whatever's remaining on your debt will be forgiven. So that will give young people a much better head start, because everybody here, if they haven't experienced it personally, somebody in your family has finished college with huge amounts of debt that they're having trouble repaying. I know Michelle and I did too. So there are a whole range of things that we're trying to do, working with colleges, community colleges, universities, to try to improve our education system. One of the things that I announced this week was we're really going to focus on science and math, because that's where our young people, I think, are falling the most behind. And we've made a commitment that we're going to hire, over the next couple of years, 10,000 new science and math teachers. And we're going to work with the schools to help redesign their math and science curriculums so that we start boosting. I want to get to the